I picked up these organic bananas for 10 pence, and today I'm going to show you how I made 6 sweet but healthy treats for the family to enjoy, as well as a super easy secret dessert that I'll share at the end. A lot of people think that eating healthy means spending a lot of money on ingredients. And I know that I probably would buy more organic fruit and veg if it didn't add so much extra cost onto our weekly food shop. So I was really excited when I saw these bananas for 10p in the shop, and even more so because this time they were organic. One of my favourite things to do when I'm out in the shops is to keep an eye out for overripe fruit that they've reduced, because often you can get some really good bargains, and actually baking with bananas is really at its best when they're like this and overripe, because they're really sweet and they add a lot of natural sweetness to your bakes without needing to use any refined sugar. So in this video you'll see I make lots of different snacks using these bananas and my store cupboard favourites, and I've got a special sweet treat at the end which I will share. And for that I took the remaining bunch of bananas, I split it up into chunks and I popped it in the freezer. In this recipe, I'm going to be making some no-bake chewy oat bars. The kids love these sort of things. They're really easy to snack on and they hardly take any time at all to make. So let's get started with the first treat. I'm going to weigh my oats ready to pop in the mix. Now I have a slight confession. Since owning the Thermomix, I have become quite lazy with my other kitchen appliances, and the batteries have been dead on our scales for goodness knows how long, as I can weigh ingredients in the Thermomix, so it might look a little bit like I'm overcomplicating things doing it in here, but I just need to buy some new batteries. I've seen some recipes for these online, and again I've been reluctant to make them because the common theme they all share is that they are bound together by the stickiness of nut butter. I tend to avoid nut-based recipes just so then the kids can use them in their school lunch boxes. As these will live in our fridge, I thought this would be a fun thing to try. It was a very simple recipe to follow. Again, you mash bananas, combine with the other ingredients, press into a tray, and you can either chill these or you can freeze them if you want them to be ready sooner. You do need to let them properly set before you try and slice them. Now, if I'd had some dark chocolate in the house, you could melt some of that down and drizzle it over the top, but we are running a little bit low on those sorts of ingredients, so I didn't do that this time. I'm also using some store cupboard ingredients that I use all of the time in my baking. So if you're familiar with my channel, you'll know that I love chia seeds. I think they're such a great way to add fibre to baking. I also use oats in a lot of my bakes, which is really handy. And in one of the recipes that I'm sharing in this video, I turn oats into oat flour, which is a really handy trick. I also really like using peanut butter in baking. However, now one of our children is at school, I am having to do this slightly less because we can't take nuts in with the lunchbox. But in this video today, I am going to be using peanut butter as these are snacks that we will be enjoying at home. I also, a couple of years ago, made the switch from cocoa powder over to cacao powder because cacao powder is less processed than cocoa powder and has a really good mix of minerals in. I tend to buy it in big bags like this from Amazon. I'm going to be honest, I don't have a favourite cacao supplier. I generally tend to go with the one that's got the best deal on, because if you're buying a bag like this, it is not the cheapest ingredient, but a bag does last a very long amount of time, and I really like how rich the flavour is. So you don't need to use too much. It is quite a cost-effective way to add the chocolatey taste to baking using a raw and a natural ingredient. Next up, I'm going to make some chewy banana oaty cookies, as the kids always absolutely love these, and these also freeze really well, so we don't have to eat them all in one go, although I'm not too sure how long they will last if I don't stash some of them in the freezer. You'll notice that I'm not bothering washing up the dish, as actually
It uses pretty much similar crossover ingredients. So any excuse to save on washing up, and I am 100% there. I know a lot of people have named comments about the fact that we have 3 ovens in our kitchen, but one thing that you don't often see on the videos is not only do we have 3 ovens, we also decided that we would get 2 dishwashers, which might be controversial, but somehow every day we fill them. So if you think the 3 ovens is bad, you need to see my dishwashers.
Whenever I have the oven on, I do like to make the most of it being on. And so I picked another recipe that I knew could bake at the same time. And this recipe, again, is one that is really handy for making in bulk so that you've got it in the freezer. And for that reason, I didn't actually use nut butter in these so that the girls could take them in their lunch boxes for school. Those of you who aren't familiar with me and my background, I have 2 young children. And when they started being able to eat real food, I really started to take a critical look at what we were eating. Slowly, I have been trying to move us away from ultra-processed foods, having too much sugar in our diet, eating more fibre, just trying to increase the diversity of the foods that we eat. And a lot of the things that I make on my channel are family-friendly dinners, lunchbox snacks, and foods that I know my kids will like, but also have a healthy twist. And it is a bit bad. When I made the brownies that are in this video, our eldest child asked me before she ate them, have these brownies got any beans or lentils in them? Because usually I do like to chuck a tin of black beans into my brownies. And much to her delight, this time that recipe did not include any beans, so she happily gobbled them all up. But yeah, my main motivator for trying out different recipes and experimenting is just trying to increase the diversity of the foods in our diet. And I love to always know that I've got homemade snacks in the freezer, not only to save us eating unhealthy foods and reaching for easy options when we're out and about, but also to save us money, because I feel like the cost of food is constantly going up and you can make so much at home from so little. Hey, if you can get a bunch of bananas for 10p, this video hopefully will show you just how many different things you can make out of that and how it's always worth looking out for these bargains when you're in the shops. I'm going to make some banana bread muffins and I am going to be using oats in this. But as I mentioned before, I do like to turn oats into oat flour. And so I'm going to blitz these oats up into a nice oat flour, which will be part of the base of the dry ingredients to this recipe. So as you can see, the oats have been turned into a fine powder, like a flour, which I can now use in the recipe. And you don't need to use a Thermomix for this. You could do this in a high-speed food processor. Just make sure that you keep it going until you've got that fine powder. For anyone that does have a Thermomix, I always love the fact that as I'm baking, I can get it to clean itself so that it's ready for the next thing that I need to do in it. Such a handy feature. I wish all my things did this. Because I am doubling up my batch to be time efficient, I have also recently invested in an extra one of these mini muffin tins, and it's so handy to be able to make 48 mini muffins in one go, as these are just perfect for lunch boxes. So I'm not going to be putting any nuts in this recipe, as these are going to be really handy to top up my freezer stash. So I add the oat flour into the mix, stir it all up, and what I'm doing is I've split the mix into 2 batches. So the first batch mainly has chocolate chips, and I like banana and chocolate chip bites. Once I've filled that muffin mould, then I've added a bit of cacao powder, and because I was running a little low on chocolate chips, I've boosted it with some raisins. So the other half of the muffin batch are chocolate and raisin. I find that even if you've just done a little bit of variety in that sense, in the flavour of the bake that you've made, it just means you've got more options in the freezer when you're making a lunchbox and you're not sure what to put in there. So as I mentioned before, I love using cacao powder in baking, and it does have quite a strong and bitter taste. When you're doing a bake where maybe there's not as much liquid in the recipe that you're making, it can kind of take on some of that moisture. So you'll notice that I'm normally only using 1 or 2 spoonfuls at a time, because you really get a lot of flavour out of a small amount of cacao powder. So at face value, it can look quite expensive to buy a kilogram bag, but actually it does go a really long way. We really like to use cacao powder to make homemade hot chocolates, sweetened with a little bit of maple syrup, as that's a much better alternative to some of the drinking chocolates that you can buy that are quite ultra processed. I also really like stirring it into Greek yogurt to give that a different taste. And we've even used it to make homemade chocolate frosting or chocolate sauce to pour over things. It's such a versatile ingredient and a great one to have in your cupboard.
So they go in the oven at the same time as the cookies, and they will bake whilst I get the kitchen tidy and ready for the next set of recipes. Now, I really love getting our kids involved in baking and cooking, and the next set of recipes were all made by my youngest child, who was off that day from nursery.
So we decided that we would do an experiment. We would do a recipe that we really like, and we'd do something quick and easy that our eldest child could help out with when she came home from school. So first up, we started with the experiment. Now, I quite like making refined sugar-free fudge, and in the past I have made that using melted dark chocolate as the base, but I didn't have that ingredient in. So we had to go at making a version where you mash bananas, you combine with maple syrup, cacao powder, and line a tin, pop in the freezer to set, topped with some chocolate chips. I really like using maple syrup in baking, as I don't really need to use too much of it, especially in recipes like the ones today where I'm using overripe bananas that are already quite sweet. But maple syrup is such a great ingredient to have in. You can keep it in the fridge and it's so versatile. Actually, when making things like what I've been doing today with oats and peanut butter, it does kind of help to break up the mix as well, which is really handy. Now, these were so delicious, but I would say they can't really be out of the freezer for too long or they start to become too soft. So they were a very, very tasty experiment, but probably needs a little bit more refinement in the recipe to make them a bit firmer if we were to make them again. So the next thing we did was we decided we would make a real crowd pleaser, and that is brownies. Because we were going to be enjoying these at home, we made these taste extra indulgent by using crunchy peanut butter. So I do have to hold my hands up and say that this peanut butter is my guilty pleasure. And when I made a video before, someone did mention that it does contain sustainably sourced palm oil. The kids normally have the peanut-only version. But I don't know, I just absolutely love the whole earth peanut butter. It is my guilty pleasure. So again, we mashed up our banana. We added in some cacao powder, a little bit of maple syrup, the peanut butter, an egg, and some oat flour. So I was really proud of my little one. She hadn't cracked an egg before, and she decided today was the day she was going to give it a go. And I think she did a pretty good job. We added in the oat flour, and this is a trick that I love doing if you don't just always want to use your usual flour. You can blend up oats, and they make a really good flour base too. And it works quite well in brownies, which are quite fudgy in their texture. So these go in the oven and they're baked until they're nice and fudgy, and they were so delicious. They didn't last very long once they came out the oven. Another crowd pleaser, the kids really like energy balls because they're bite size and they fit really nicely in their lunchbox. But again, as we were going to enjoy these at home, we used peanut butter as one of the binders in these energy balls. So simply they are oats, peanut butter, a bit of maple syrup, some chocolate chips, and some chia seeds. So I really like using chia seeds in my baking, as I think they're a really good way to boost the fibre of the snack, but also in recipes like this, when they start absorbing some of the moisture, they swell and they become really good binders too. And as a general rule of thumb, they're really good to use in things like, overnight oats or muffins, cookies, energy balls, anything where they have an opportunity to absorb some moisture from whatever mixture that they're in. I wouldn't normally give the kids chia seeds just dry because they do swell when they interact with some kind of moisture. It's much better if you can pop them in a yogurt and stir it in so that they swell. And I always try and make sure that I do that in my baking. So we made this mix together, we popped it in the fridge, and then when my eldest child came home, we rolled them into really tasty energy balls. I feel like no good baking session is without a little bit of chaos, and for us that came the following day, where we took the remainder of the snacks out with us for our morning, where we were going to go on a walk with some friends. And when we parked up, we opened the boot and out slid the Tupperware onto the concrete, smashed into pieces, filled all of the snacks with shards of broken glass and rendered them completely inedible, which was a bit of a nightmare and definitely a sign for me that I need to buy some stainless steel lunch boxes, so I will be on the hunt for those. I learned this next trick when our eldest child was a toddler. We wanted her to have some ice cream in the summer, but wanted to see if we could make a homemade version that was a little bit healthier and had less sugar in. And I saw this great tip online. If you take bananas that are overripe, you don't really want to throw away, and you break them into pieces and freeze them, then you can get them out when you're ready to make some homemade ice cream. And it makes like a soft textured ice cream, and the kids absolutely love it when we make it. You could keep it just as banana, but I do like to add some extra tastes into it now for them. So I'll show you our favourite combination that we have. I'm making mine in my Thermomix, but you can just use a normal food processor for it. You might need to let the bananas soften up a little bit out of the freezer if your food processor isn't super powerful, because obviously they're quite hard lumps of ice at the moment. But yeah, any food processor should be able to do the job. You just might need to let them defrost a little bit. As you can see, the bananas have blended up into such a fantastic consistency, and the key is to act quickly when you're making this, because obviously they do start to soften up and the ice cream melts a little bit the longer you take to whiz it all together. But the texture is perfect, and the kids were delighted when I came through with this recipe. My freezer is looking really full at the moment. If you watched my last video where I made a month of lunchbox fillers, I've got such a great stash in here. I've got a whole different mix of snacks, from savoury pastry rolls through to different types of muffin, to crumble bars, to energy balls, and even things like sheet pancakes. And I love knowing that I've got these things in so that my kids feel like they're getting a really great variety of snacks, but I'm saving myself time and money as well. So everything has come out of the oven now, and I'm going to pop them on a wire rack to cool down, ready to be taste tested, importantly, by my children, and then stored ready for the freezer for when we want to pop them into snack boxes and lunch boxes for those recipes that were nut-free. I think now more than ever, it's really important to challenge yourself to think of different ways you can get creative when you're cooking. I'm certainly noticing the cost of our food shop seems to constantly be going up. And so when I have a day like this where I spot some bananas for such a great price, I try and challenge myself to think, well, what are all the different things that I can make with them? I also found another great spot in the shop, which were these tender stem broccoli spears, which were perfectly fine. Again, they were also organic, and they were also 10p, which seems really surprising because there was absolutely nothing wrong with them. And these are perfect for serving on the side of the kids' meals. we are also now trying to support our local food waste recycling group, and they really try and make sure that food that perhaps has been over ordered by a supermarket or just hasn't sold within the time frame that the shop has decided it can be on the shelves, they ensure that that food doesn't go to waste and goes out to the community. And by supporting those food hubs, you support the initiatives that they do to help people who can't afford to feed their families to have access to really affordable food. And so I'm trying to use those a little bit more. We're really lucky that our town has a great food waste program, and I would definitely encourage you to look out for that in your local area. As often it's fruit and vegetables and sometimes things like bread and pastries that are going to waste and will go to landfill if they aren't given a new lease of life, if they aren't snapped up by someone at one of the food shares. I also think this is such an important lesson to teach our children. I think now, they're so used to just having access to anything and being able to buy most different things that they could want or need. I think teaching them the importance of that sustainability angle and trying to get creative and make different recipes and snacks out of something so simple as a bunch of overripe bananas, I think is a good mentality to instill in them, and hopefully they'll take some of this with them as they get older. So there you go, 6 easy snack ideas and a healthy ice cream, all from some overripe bananas for a grand total of 20p. I had 2 bunches of bananas that have served me really well across those recipes. I hope this has inspired you to keep an eye out for deals like that in your local area and to get creative in the different snacks and meals that you make at home. If you liked this video, please be sure to subscribe and check out some of my other videos where I do batch food cooking challenges, and I also try and do budget cooking challenges as well.